Well, let me kick it off by just again a little introduction about me. Some of you saw the email and it had some information there, but I'm a religious educator who works for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I have a strong theological background in that church, and that has significantly shaped my way of thinking and feeling and living. And that undoubtedly introduces some degree of bias that I openly admit. I also have a PhD in Family, Consumer, and Human Development, FCHD. Now I guess Utah State's changed its name to Human Development and Family Studies. I got that degree in 2009. My emphasis was in adolescence, and my dissertation topic was focused on the impact of grandparents on adolescent risk-taking behaviors. I am not a scholar. I am not currently actively involved in any research or writing today, but I do have some background and some experience, and I do dabble still with a study every now and then to keep current with my field, and I hope that just gives me some credibility. Don't expect to be wowed or dazzled. You're not going to see any fancy slides or creative diagrams like some that I've watched in the past that are really good at that, but I do hope that you'll still be intrigued and informed, and what I offer is valuable to you. Been married 27 years. I am the father of 7 children, ages 25 down to age 11, 1 daughter and 6 boys. I've lived in Southeast Idaho for 12 years, and now I've been in Uinta Basin for 12 years too. Tonight, I'd like to focus on 2 areas that have been shown to have something to do, at least, with increasing adolescent overall wellness and improving community and family connectedness, specifically through 2 things: religiosity and spirituality, and second, eating together as a family. In any reputable research, you'll hear something along the lines of this phrase: correlation does not equal causation. That's to say that religion and spirituality and eating together as a family are not surefire guarantees to any and all children never having issues with drug and alcohol use, poor grades, sexual promiscuity, mental and emotional difficulties, friends that concern us as parents, or suicidal thoughts and ideations. But it is to say that there's something to these subjects that seems to decrease the likelihood of any of those difficulties having significant negative effects on their lives, and that makes it worth exploring for us. The Suicide Prevention Resource Center lists the following as protective factors in child development and overall wellness. Quote, effective behavioral health care, connectedness to individuals, family, community, and social institutions, life skills, self-esteem and a sense of purpose or meaning in life, and cultural, religious, or personal beliefs that discourage suicide, close quote. I believe that religiosity and or spirituality and eating together as a family could be strong players aiding in every one of those protective factors. So what does the literature suggest? I'd like to talk about the 2 topics separately. As I go through these 2 topics, though, please feel free at any time to write some thoughts or any questions in the chat. I think Sheila's going to be monitoring that for me, and raise a hand and get our attention if you'd like to rather speak out to the whole crowd. Either one is certainly welcome and not going to be a problem or a disruption for me. A couple weeks ago, my family and I gathered around to watch a classic Christmas show. It's The Miracle on 34th Street. And there was a scene in there that struck a chord because of the topic tonight that I'm tackling. The scene involves a man named Fred Gailey, if you remember, speaking to Doris Walker, who he's courting. Doris Walker is a realist through and through. She's a single mom raising a 10-year-old daughter. And she has some real concerns about encouraging her daughter to believe in something like Kris Kringle and Santa Claus. And Fred makes this comment to her that I think was kind of neat. Quote, faith is believing in something when common sense tells you not to. Don't you see? It's not just Kris that's on trial. It's everything he stands for. It's kindness and joy and love and all the other intangibles. Look, Doris, someday you're going to find out that your way of facing this realistic world just doesn't work. And when you do, don't overlook those lovely intangibles. You'll discover those are the only things that are worthwhile. As we dive into the topic of religiosity and or spirituality, those are not the same. They're not interchangeable terms. Religiosity is institutional. It's an affiliation to a particular church. Spirituality is individual and can be completely unaffiliated with a church or denomination. Spirituality is often associated with the natural environment and beautiful things, such as concerns like fulfillment and happiness and community. Can be a lot of overlap between the two, but they can also be very independent of each other. A starting point for spirituality can be religion, art, literature, nature, a concern for social justice, local and global issues, environmental, economical, and social issues. It might arise from a strong identification with a particular group that somebody feels has been marginalized and they're wanting to take up their cause. This is different from what we've seen in previous generations, and the focus in the generations today is not the same. Adolescents today do not relate to traditions and traditional religion as did older generations. There's an increased caution about religion in adolescents. They're wary that religion might restrict their growing sense of autonomy because religion is often perceived as moral restriction. And more we see a prevailing sense of relativism, that any way is as good as another, and somebody might say it's a matter of personal taste. As a result of some of those attitudes and feelings, more and more young people are self-identifying as spiritual and not religious. They're not apathetic, nor are they uninterested, but they may be more interested in spiritual ideas and practices that have some immediate felt relevance or serve some pragmatic function in their immediate world. There's a desire to be personal and eclectic, a focus on both local and world issues, and make room for their freedom and individuality. I want to share my screen for a second here and have a couple slides with some information that I hope will be of value to you. Sheila, is that coming through just fine?
Yes, looks great. Thank you.
You bet. A study from 2008 at Baylor University found some interesting statistics regarding religiosity and spirituality in teenagers in the United States of America particularly. As you see the first couple numbers, 95% of American teenagers reported believing in God. 93% of those affiliated with a particular religious group or a denomination. However, only 40% of those indicated that they were very much trying to follow the teachings of their religion. Now, from the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints standpoint, this last summer, something that might be of interest to you, we were given some statistics regarding young adults in the church that I work with, 18 to 30-year-olds particularly. The number one demographic in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints right now, leaving active participation in the church, are these 18 to 30-year-olds. For the last 10 years, we have lost approximately 10,000 kids a year. So in a decade, 100,000 18 to 30-year-olds have chosen to withdraw from what that second statistic is reporting, active participation in their faith. For years and years, the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints in the United States particularly was the torchbearer in keeping our kids active and involved in that faith. Now we're one of the lowest in the United States. Ironically, however, the number one demographic of individuals choosing to join the LDS church right now are also 18 to 30-year-olds. So clearly we have a generation who is searching and who is also struggling with religiosity and spirituality. As you look back at the rest of these numbers, a lot of practices that they're involved in. They report they frequently pray alone, 36%, read scriptures weekly or more, 41% are involved in some kind of Sunday school. And again, this isn't just now the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is of all faiths. 36% are part of a church youth group. 23% indicate they're involved in church-sponsored activities and help the less fortunate. And the last number there, they're involved in some kind of a choir or music group. Another article that had some interesting information for me. A BYU professor headed this up and studied research over the last 30 years in this subject area, and they found 4 particular patterns that seem to stand out in the research in this stuff. First is they noticed that it generally protects adolescents from negative outcomes. And specifically, we name things like risk-taking behaviors and mental illness, and promotes positive youth development. And in a few minutes, I'm going to go through a list of a number of things that the research shows to support that. Number 2, there's some evidence between religiosity and spirituality and adaptive outcomes as being causal. I know I started earlier that says any good reputable research will say that correlation doesn't equal causation, but there's some clear evidence here that says here we can make some one-to-one connections. Third, excuse me, there are numerous complex and dynamic processes by which religiosity, spirituality relate to youth outcomes. There's some mediating things also that are out there, such as the peers, that's their audience that they associate with on a daily basis, the values and attitudes they bring to the table, social control and norms that they're a part of. And then fourth, religiosity and spirituality is multidimensional. That should be kind of intuitive to us. Private and personal aspects of their religiosity, such as how much they value it, I guess, their own personal importance, tends to be a stronger indicator of how much their faith and religion affects their lives more than something that's an outward expression like going to church. So we want to do more to internalize things with the kids today, not just get them doing outward practices. Hopefully that makes some sense. Before I go to that next slide, let me come back now, just look at me. I mentioned before that I had a long list of things that I wanted to read to you, that from a number of different articles. I just tried to just pull apart what's the benefit, what's the concise good thing for religiosity and spirituality in young people today. So just listen to this, and if again there's anything that stands out to you, if you want any more background on it, I'd be happy to welcome that in the chat or any comments you want to make. But here's some of the things that were in the research for positive outcomes in youth and adolescents for being involved in a religion or having a good, strong spiritual base. Better health physically, decreased drug and alcohol use as adolescents and also later then as adults, decreased sexual behaviors, increased identity development, decreased internalizing and externalizing behaviors, decreased suicide rates, positive coping, greater emotional control, increased resilience, improved psychological well-being, improved peer relationships with youth who themselves also engaged in fewer problem behaviors, improved academic performance, increases in pro-social behaviors, improved self-control or self-regulation, improved sense of belonging, reduced neurological stress responses, increased future orientations. In other words, it helps youth focus more on distal rewards rather than proximal rewards at the moment. Simply engaging in religious behavior, particularly attending worship services, may have less impact on youth than the degree to which they appropriate and internalize their religiosity and spirituality. There's 5 moderating effects that the research really emphasize. One of those is stress. Parenting and family is a second. Victimization is a third. Violence exposure a fourth. And self-control and impulsivity. All of those, again, have some moderating effects in the influence of religion and spirituality. However, the more they're involved in religion or spiritual things, even in those circumstances that I just mentioned, the research suggests that they are less likely to experience long-term negative outcomes. Religion provides youth with moral directives about right and wrong, spiritual experiences that helps internalize moral commitments and role models to serve as examples. It provides opportunities to learn leadership skills and coping skills and acquire cultural capital, things like knowledge and skills related to history, music, cultural traditions. It provides youth with social capital, a supportive non-familial adult system, sources of helpful information, and access to resources and opportunities. Religion offers a network of relationships with supportive peers, religious leaders, and other invested adults, and links to regional, national, and even global religious organizations that provide services, information, resources, and opportunities. Believers may conceptualize personal adversity as being part of God's plan and place faith in God to provide direction to meet future challenges. Typical adolescent challenges are framed in such a way that makes them appear to be more stable. This year with COVID-19, That's one where we've seen it in our Seminary and Institute programs, that having some kind of a spiritual base has given some kind of an anchor for them to get through this crazy year. And so I've been a firsthand witness to having some kind of a tie for their life. There's been a big shift away from religion, and as I mentioned, it's driven by these teenagers, 18 to 30-year-olds. And from 2001 to 2011, another surveyed group of participants in a study went from 7% of them saying that they were not particularly interested in religion or spirituality to 22% saying that. So again, there's some struggles that we have to work through. The research has some information about some potential negative effects that religiosity and spirituality could have. And I think it's important that we share that again, this isn't a cure-all to things, that religion and spirituality can be taken too far in some cases. Conflict in the home, particularly when the child is experiencing high levels of conflict with parents or guardians, religiosity and spirituality could become a real negative factor. A young person may feel a particular desire to go, in fact, 180 degrees different from whatever mom and dad think, feel, and believe. And so if there's that tension between the parents and kids, sometimes this will turn against them. Anytime there's extremism in religion, we've seen all kinds of examples like potential radical Islamic beliefs that have led to terrorism. In the United States, we've seen things like the Salem witch trials, the Ku Klux Klan. In world history, we've seen the Nazi genocide. In LDS church history, we have some concerns with what occurred at the Mountain Meadows Massacre, when sometimes there's some imbalance and they go too far with religion. Another area is exclusiveness. As members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we've sometimes, again, speaking from my standpoint in that faith, we've sometimes made our kids maybe feel like there's an exclusiveness to being LDS. And if somebody isn't, then we don't include them in the club. And so we've almost maybe even taught our kids sometimes to not associate with people of other faith or people that don't have any kind of a religious basis, as if they're bad or they don't have any good to offer. That's obviously an inappropriate I think, application of what religion is trying to do and what spirituality would want to do. And that can happen again in any faith. So as I pause there for a minute, are there any questions about any of those topics I mentioned, or any concerns or thoughts anybody would like to share?
You're welcome to either type in your thoughts or your questions and we can let you know, or you can just turn your microphone on right now and share your thoughts or ask your question.
If anything pops up at a later time too, feel free again to just chime in and be happy to talk to you. Okay, I'm going to move on to the second topic then for a few minutes. Eating together as a family. There's some obvious things about that. It gives parents a chance to teach their kids, to spend time getting to know them, and to build close relationships with them. There's benefits in the research to both parents and kids. There's better mental and physical health in both, better socialization, and lower risks for younger family members. Once again, I'm going to share my screen and post a couple slides here about it. So I went through some of the articles and some recent stuff. I think there were 6 research-backed reasons why eating together as a family is a good idea. Reason number 1, young children are more likely to prefer healthy meals and less likely to be overweight and obese. They have a lower likelihood of developing eating disorders. That probably comes from eating regular, nutritious, home-cooked meals that quite often the kids are involved in helping to make and serving. These families also seem to eat more varieties of food and are more likely to have tried different foods. I've heard of several families that do international nights, and maybe once a month they make a meal that's just focused on some part of the world. And there's been quite a bit of homework done to find out what the main courses might be, fancy desserts, and make it a real an event for the whole family to be a part of it. They even dress up even to match the costume of the time. Number 2 reason, smarter kids. Children are more likely to know and use more words than average. Children who have sit-down meals with their parents know 6 times more rare words or words that children just don't typically use than children who don't eat with their families. Children who eat 5 times or more a week do better in school and score better on an average. By the way, in the research, there seems to be a number in this regard that it's 5 to 7 or more times a week eating is where we see these effects. If it's 3 or less, we seem to lose all the effects of eating as a family. So that was kind of interesting to me. 3rd reason, safer kids. Eating together seems to be helpful in recognizing bullying and addressing that. If the pattern, though, of sitting together regularly hasn't happened, then you can see how this would be less recognizable, and the kids themselves might be more hesitant in bringing it up. Number 4, happier kids. Children are more likely to be emotionally strong and have better mental health. They're more likely to be adjusted, have good manners and communication skills, better sense of resilience and self-esteem. Teens show lower incidence of illnesses like depression and anxiety. They're less likely to be suicidal or engage in unsafe sexual practices, and show a lower risk of teen pregnancies. Another thing that I didn't put on there was just that moms in particular were also found to be happier and much less stressed when they were eating meals together as a family 5 or more times a week. Number 5, there's a sobering effect for this. Sobering, again, in terms of alcohol consumption, particularly in drug use. In families who share 5 or more major meals, again, teens were more likely to report that they did not, smoke or drink or use drugs. These teens were less likely to have friends who drank and did drugs. Again, less than 3 meals a week, we start to lose this effect. Research suggests a lower chance of future drug use even once the teens have left home for further studies at colleges and universities, or when they leave to go to work. Number 6, better relationships. Parent-child relationships seem to be better, more honest and open with each other, and the parents are more likely to know what's going on in a child's life. Children report that they feel they can share their problems and turn to their parents for advice and support. Now I'm going to come back to home here.
We do have a question in the chat.
Beautiful.
Can you see that question?
I happen to know the source of that question. Hello, Arlene. How are you? The question reads, how do you approach making sure your teens associate with teens with the same values so as to increase the likelihood that your teen will keep the values you want them to without coming across as being religiously exclusionary? It's a great question. And I wish I had a magic bullet for you, Arlene. I think there's a tie to this very topic about family dinners. In fact, in one of the research articles that made this comment that teens who are having 5 to 7 or more a week dinners with their family are almost 1.5 times as likely to attend religious services at least 4 times a month and continue with the family's traditional religious beliefs. So there's something maybe that happens at that dinner table that passes this kind of a value that you have for them onto that individual child, more likely again than if you weren't having dinners together. As I started with the quote from Fred Gailey, there may be an element of faith here that we just have to believe in. And sometimes when you've already seen this, I'm sure, as a parent, the more you try to force your hand on a particular thing, the more it seems they want to fight against it. So sometimes backing off after it's been taught and expressed and trusting in faith, maybe that's going to be something that they attach to eventually it might be what you have to lean on. I don't know that I can give you a scientific answer per se here, in that regard. Arlene, I don't know, does that help in any way? And she may have to type her answer. Maybe she can't talk.
Yeah, that did. Thank you.
Thanks, Arlene. No question today, we have some challenges in our world to families eating together. We're seeing more and more families skipping meals simply because of workloads. And even if they're at home, that's not getting any better. There's guilt sometimes associated with what some say is a waste of time eating dinner. And we have a lot of conflicting schedules. I know just personally in my own home, we've got one playing basketball, one's involved in a band concert and choir performances. I've got myself here in Roosevelt working, my wife's at work in Vernal. We're just scattered from top to bottom, and that makes it tough. Another interesting fact in the research says that if we're watching television instead of talking together while we're eating, almost all the benefits of having family dinner together are gone. Even if the TV is just on in the background, it seems to harm the child's attention span, and the quality of the relationship they have with the parents tanks, and the overall mental development is lost. If mealtime becomes a time when parents start scolding kids or criticizing kids, the parent-child relationship is obviously hurt, and this becomes a negative impact. If children see their mom and dad fighting at the table, then they become distressed, and again, all the effects of good things going out of it are shot. An idea that I just want to share with you, a perspective, I guess, is what I call the doctrine of accumulation. On an average, I just was talking with my wife about this, I would say our family dinners consist of a sit-down time that's probably between 10 to 20 minutes sometimes is a good family dinner for us. So for easy math, let's just say a meal is 10 minutes long. In and of itself, that doesn't seem like much. A parent or a guardian could easily dismiss its value in that single snapshot of time. They might say, what possible difference can or does having a meal together make? One meal, 10 minutes? And that line of questioning is valid. And in reality, that one meal probably doesn't hardly make one bit of difference in the life of a kid. But you calculate that over the period of 1 year, and just assume there's only one meal a day that the family is eating all together. And again, that lasts for 10 minutes. Add that up, and in 1 year's time now, you've got almost 61 hours of time together as a family in an environment that's probably within 6 to 8 feet of each other. Just imagine the potential that offers in interacting with the people who are most closely tied to us and who should care most deeply for us. Think about the experiences that might be shared, the feelings and the emotions that can get revealed and released, and hopefully there's a fair amount of laughter. Increase that to 2 meals a day, and you start to get a vision of what potentially could start to happen. That's what I call the doctrine of accumulation. So what can be done in our schools or in communities to aid in promoting youth involvement in either of both of these activities? A couple thoughts that I've come up with that I hope are of use to somebody out there. Taking honest and unbiased looks at different religions and their beliefs and traditions without any attempt to proselytize, but respectfully inform and appreciate in order to become more understanding. Such an approach might stimulate more interest in their own traditions, where we might be afraid actually that it would take them away from it. I think if we can not be afraid of introducing what other people think and believe, it's going to be a good thing. Rather than an educator or a parent asking, what am I going to teach or tell my students or my children today? A better question and an approach is to ask, what are my students or my children going to experience today? The learning process, I think, needs to become shifted a little bit more from right now what I see is most of the time top down or front to back. Often you look at the dynamics of the way a classroom is set up. The teacher's at the front, everybody faces he or her. And I think we need to switch that a little bit. The world that these young people are in today is a lot different than that dynamic. Their world is complex, it's involved, it's multifaceted, it's integrated, it's holistic. The teacher and the community leaders and parents need to become fellow seekers with them rather than the traditional adult or institution telling them what to do or how to do it. Mealtime is a perfect opportunity again for this to be demonstrated, where a parent conscientiously has a good, meaningful question or two to throw at the table, and then carefully listen and just sit back and let the young people talk and share without judgment, without prejudice. And in this world, and with all the information that they're exposed to, we probably as parents and as leaders also ought to be prepared to hear them say things that we don't really like to hear and may not feel the same about. But again, our reaction to that can be very, very helpful in the long run of showing that we're not threatened by new ideas or different opinions. In fact, we value that and we want them to share freely. And as we do that and we show that we're not scared, again, they might gravitate more even to then our beliefs and our faith or the world that we live in, I guess, as adults today. And just something to think about, I hope, in the way you set up a classroom or the way you talk to your kids. I think we should do more to look for ways to encourage young people to think about things that are beyond themselves and things that are tangible that might produce or promote spirituality. More time, like in nature, observing and considering how things have come to be. A lot of what-if statements that don't promote, again, any religion or a faith per se, but that invite thoughts about, for example, what if there is more to us in our existence than just this world? What if there is or there is not a divine God of all of us? What if my existence has real meaning and purpose as part of something divine or spiritual? And then let them just freely consider things like that and think and feel and write and express freely about them. It feels like sometimes as a parent that maybe the public school, the churches, and then us as parents are competing against one another for time and attention. I think we can do better at recognizing the benefits of all of those things and that those benefits are reciprocal. That if I promote religiosity and spirituality, if I promote things like eating together as families from a secular standpoint, that almost everything else improves in that adolescent and the outcomes that we hope would benefit them. And that affects then the schools and the society that we live in. So maybe an assignment could be given by a teacher at the school to say, for the next 2 weeks, I want you or challenge you to do something again that brings the family together at dinner. And then I want you to talk about, maybe you throw out a question and then they're going to write a little 1-page, 2-page report on what was said around the dinner table with regards to that question. Maybe you send them out on a walkabout someplace and say your assignment today is to consider one of those questions that I mentioned before about what if there's more than just what we see here. What would it mean to have a belief in something higher than us? And again, let them just freely think and write about stuff like that. You can still critique grammar, punctuality, make them go do some research to see if there's anything else out there of what others have said about it to make it secular and yet still have a promotion of spirituality. A quote that I liked and appreciated was that questions about spirituality sit at the heart of understanding how individuals negotiate life and how collectively as communities we negotiate uncertainty, close quote. Again, in a time like ours right now, there are all kinds of uncertainties. The political world is a mess right now. The social movements that we're seeing and the contention around that has them insecure and scared in a lot of ways. COVID-19 and that pandemic and its impacts on their education, impacts on their families' employment and income, their impact on what they perceive as their freedoms to go about in society today has made a lot of things uncertain for them. And so again, having a spirituality or a religious foundation is a blessing and a good thing for them. And I just hope that's been some ideas tonight and some thoughts that would stir and make us think about that and try to again promote either one of those things to help kids. So that's the basis of all the things I've tried to compile tonight. Sheila, are there any other chat comments, or does anybody have any comments or questions they'd like to throw out at me?
if you would like to just make sure that you unmute yourself and have some questions or comments that you'd like to ask Brother Goodrich, it would be a perfect time. So please feel free to do so.
For anybody that's in the public school system, maybe I can throw a question to you. My situation as a religious educator and working for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I'm not under the same constraints that I think many of you are with regards to, we hear it called church and state. But I'm interested to know is what I said there at the end about, is there more that could be done possibly and not break any of those barriers, I guess, that are in place to keep those things apart?
Are you asking us if there's more we can do in the classroom in order to implement this without breaking the laws of the state and religion?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I don't want anybody to get in any trouble, of course, but is there more that could be done to promote religiosity or spirituality in the public classroom? And we're not trying to promote a particular church. We're not trying to proselytize per se, but to think in terms of something of a more spiritual nature. Is spirituality contrary to the secular world?
Something that just came to mind, and I don't know if it really pertains, but what about teaching like acceptance? Just like what you were saying, that as we learn to maybe appreciate what other people believe or what they think without judgment, is there a place where we can maybe implement that? And I'm trying to think with the social emotional learning where we're talking about how to understand our emotions and our feelings, if we could maybe emphasize more just on the acceptance and that we can love and we can appreciate those around us without, judging them for the way they believe. That's just my thought, though.
I think that's a good one. I would hope that would be a conversation that would not come anywhere close to breaking a boundary there.
I don't teach at a school, but I do work in the community with kids at risk and their families. And there's been a few times where I've gone into their homes and their teenagers are talking about friend acceptance. And I hear that if they're not LDS, a lot of times, no, but the LDS friends cannot hang out with them. Their parents will not let them. Or if these teenagers, maybe they have parents that smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol, then their parents will not let their teens hang out with them. And I think if there was somehow a way where we could get, regardless of the religion, I like the dinner table thing. I encourage that too. And, talk about what your values are, and then trust your teens to go out and use those values and explore those values in making their decisions about who they want to be their friend. Because you're right. It doesn't matter that somebody could be of no religion at all and still value honesty and integrity and all of those good things. So if there was a way that we could just kind of be more open-minded and teach our kids to be more open-minded and find out, who is this person who lives next door to you, regardless of what religion they are. Go explore your neighbor and find out and come home with something new that you can share with us. I don't know, something. We need to get out and let our teens get out and explore one another outside of their school group. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
I think that's wonderful comments. I sure appreciate that a lot. I've heard people make comments regarding members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, and this isn't a bash session on us, I hope, but that sometimes the LDS population has warm bread and cold hearts. And new family moves into the neighborhood, we're real quick to run over and say hi and bring them a loaf of warm bread and introduce ourselves. And then we find out that they're not members of that faith, and there's almost a shunning that takes place. And I know the church has made some concerted efforts that they're trying to help us get better at this. But that is definitely not the way it should work, that we can be much more interactive with our friends and neighbors, whether they share our faith or not. And yeah, I agree. I think that's great comments, Joanne. Appreciate that very much. Sheila, if there's anybody that would down the road have any questions, feel free to email me or reach out to me through any means they want. I'd be happy to try to discuss and help answer any more questions that there are.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. All right. Well, Brother Goodrich, we again appreciate your time and your willingness to share with us tonight as a community. And so if we don't have any other questions and if you don't have anything else, we can, I guess, conclude. If you'd like to go ahead and just end it however you'd like, Brother Goodrich.
That's it. I just appreciate the chance to share. Again, I'm sure not trying to promote any particular faith or anything like that. I have some strong beliefs in one of my own, but I've been around enough kids to recognize that they're resilient, and most of the kids today are really pretty darn good kids. But these two factors of religiosity, spirituality, and eating together as a family, I just know for a fact they make a difference. And in a world like this today, they need all the help they can get, and this will work. So thank you for your time and appreciate the chance to share a little bit.
Thank you so much, Brother Goodrich. I've really enjoyed listening to you speak, so thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Your statistics that you had tonight on those things that you shared were very interesting, Brother Goodrich. It's awesome to see really and truly those things that can have the small impact as simple as just taking the time to eat with your kids or doing that. And, you know, it's hard in schools. There's barriers or doing that. But I think if we try to teach our kids at school to be loving and kind and, you know, stop some bad or doing that. You see someone calling someone a name, then you should step up and say, don't do that. That's not right. That's not treating a person right. And some of those acts we try to do in some character ed classes and some situations like that. But anyway, we appreciate your words tonight. It's been awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We will have our next presenter the first Wednesday of January. Right now, it's looking like it will be Sam Hoops will be presenting to our youth and to the parents. So please join us again in January. And we again appreciate you, Brother Goodrich. Have a good evening.
Thanks to all of you. Appreciate that, Sheila.